ですね。
今夜私、カーネルクリスマス。私、カーネルクリスマス。カーネルクリスマス。
He thinks he's Santa Claus. Father Christmas.
Having starred in and directing films like Battle Royale, Brothers, and Kikujiro, Kitano Takeshi has gained notoriety in Japanese culture. Takeshi had started in the entertainment business as a comedian of Manzai duo. In his comedy, Takeshi talked about controversial subject matter that was too taboo for its time. He began pursuing acting more seriously with Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence, to which audience were adjusting with him as a comedian to more of a serious character. His visual art, violent tenacity, and often strange acting characters produce an overlap between dark comedy and stark drama. If art imitates life, Takeshi is a master at the craft. In each of the director's works, his personal experiences and worldview often takes form in the subtext of the characters and environment of his writing and visual cinematography. When you examine his work, you'll see that his personal hobbies expand into visuals and story of his films. For example, Takeshi is a skilled tap dancer. In his revival of Zatoichi, Takeshi incorporates tap dancing into a festival scene. Even in video game production, you can see the way he touches on often violent or serious themes, like punching your manager as an option, or a drunken father coming home to his wife and kids. Violent Cop was released in 1989, which was Kitano Takeshi's directorial debut. This film explores a world of dirty cops, blurred morality, and explicit dark humor. It is mostly considered an action film, but it uses comedy and violence to propel a seemingly larger and overarching theme. His interpretation of a man looking for vengeance goes back to the Jidai Geki films of the post-war samurai films. This film represents the beginning of his reimagined Bushido filmmaking between criminal and virtuous people, senseless youth, and overarching violence. The film centers on Azuma, an older detective who is generally broke, and uses force in any situation requiring justice. He isn't the typical hero that people would identify with or look up to, since his retaliation and violence for a good cause is controversial. His end goal is to first track the murderer and then kill him after losing his job and his sister. The way he uses violence is first from his body. Slapping, punching, and kicking are the most used. It isn't until the climax of the movie that he begins using the gun that ultimately kills people. This technique can also be seen in David Desser's Bushido films analysis. Desser describes nostalgic samurai drama as generally chronological using mono no aware, the feeling of sweet sadness or an almost inexpressible sensation of life's mortality, which is pleasantly painful. There is this overlap between disappointment and contentment, much like what we see when Azuma has to shoot his sister to save her from a life of pain and suffering. Thematically, they focus on a ronin, a masterless samurai trapped in the Giri Ninjo complex, to which duty and self are always in conflict. The ronin is a wanderer with a sense of obligation but never attacks the system. Azuma is constantly in conflict with the system but never directly attacks the police force. Rather, his focus is on Kiyohiro.
うまくやってくれということだ。たらい回しも聞かれますよ。たらい回しの原因は君にあるんだろう。
A grander theme of cops versus Yakuza stands. Both Azuma and Kiyohiro are employed by their respective corporations. Both become ronin when Azuma gets fired for planting evidence, and Kiyohiro is told to leave the Yakuza when the rogue cop begins pursuing him. This can be seen akin to anti-feudal drama, where both ronin are left masterless and become trapped in the suicidal take. The cops have a sense of nobility that must be respected, and the Yakuza have this organized hierarchy that is also met with respect.
私は皆さんに言いたいことは、警察官は聖職者であることを各自念頭に置いて、その職務に対し、誇りを持って励んでもらいたいということです。
When they lose their status, both protagonists and antagonists end up on this violent killing at the end with guns. In Dresser's analysis, the self-sacrificing hero is the most admirable hero of all. The classic samurai film usually ends badly for the protagonist struggling for a doomed cause. Nostalgic samurai drama reflects Takeshi's use of both characters to be killed in a fierce battle, which wins their own causes. Another similarity is the use of long takes and horizontal tracking shots. Takeshi often uses long takes opposed by his own crew, which, like Dexter says, de-emphasizes the illusion of death within a frame. It is not the instance of impending death or dread, but the long shot helps to track instances of time, gives distance between characters, and reveals something about those characters.
どうしてだ。
この商売いつまでもやるもんじゃないですからね。結局 一番危ない足をだってのは我々ですから。
じゃあ他から買ったらどうだい？
そりゃそうなんですけど。清弘さん、俺にも少し儲けさせてくださいよ。ギャグの出所知らないわけじゃないし、確実なルートですよね。
For themes of reckless youth, Takeshi both opens and closes the film with instances of reckless youth, destroying some part of older characters. The beginning of the film shows a bunch of teens beating up a homeless guy, to which Azuma beats one of them in a sense of vindictive justice. In Japan, there is a problem with bozuzoku, speed tribes, where teenage bike gangs appeared in the 1960s and then reached a peak in 1970s. There is an estimated 30 to 40,000 gangs, 80% of which were responsible for serious juvenile crimes, and 40% had ties with the Yakuza. The themes seen in the film show youth like teens, children, and Kikuchi, the up-and-coming detective, overcoming their adult counterparts. This may not sound like any of the samurai films, but rather as Takeshi's unique auteurism using real-world examples into his film. Lastly, violence is everywhere. You can see senseless slapping, running over someone with a car, and innocent people being shot to death. It almost seems like the characters enjoy the violence. This violence is often seen in Zen fighters, to where the hero often shows his disdain for life, his own, and the life of others, by constantly engaging in fights to the finish. Azuma will use any tactic he can, from defiance to authority, by planting evidence and torturing for information, to intimidation and violence. The only life he cares for is his ill younger sister, to which, when tainted by rape and drug use, is Azuma choosing to kill her for her own sake. There is a blur in morality when violence is used by both cops and criminals. Azuma breaks all the rules and selfishly follows his own directive, using his sense of righteous justice. Violence almost seems to be cathartic, ritualistic cleansing for this movie. Kiyohiro kills for fun, while Azuma does it for justice. But both violence is not done by guns until the last act of the film. It is when Azuma receives an illegal handgun does he understand his cause is suicidal. In conclusion, Takeshi not only borrows from the forms of samurai films, but does he change up the story so much that it becomes a new form. His use of violence, contrasting characters, overlapping morality, and cinematography is his technique and what makes his films his. Adding to that layer is his own personal style of comedy, art, and tone that makes it stand out from other films of his time. Violent Cop may be the first directorial debut and rewritten and directed to his liking, but it is seen clearer in his other films like Sonateen, Kikujiro, and Brother that he builds on these techniques and becomes more complex in his worldviews. Takeshi is an auteur for the ages, and his films like Violent Cop will take on the contemporary form of Bushido films.